Hello and a very warm welcome back to the garden. It is August and for here, which is roughly zone 8 here in the UK, it is the last opportunity to do a big bunch of outdoor sowing. So I'm going to be covering things to sow outdoors, but also things to sow undercover. Lots to do, kind of last chance. Let's go for it. So right now we've got all of these big, bulky, delicious summer crops coming out of the garden. The type of crops that you can sow outside in August, you got to think about things that are fast growing, and so we're kind of returning back to all of the leafy things, and also the things that often will run to seed quite easily if you sow them during the peak of summer, and so it actually gives us a lot of choice with what we can sow. To start off with things to sow outside, you've got a transition between still being able to sow your summer radishes like icicle or French breakfast, but to start planting and sowing your winter radishes. I have got daikon radish, which I'm trying to grow as much as I possibly can this year. And it's a great thing, if you've got a little bit of spare space within the garden, radish is a great thing to fill that space. It's going to pop up in like 4 or 5 days time. And with winter radish, you want to make sure that you space it out roughly kind of 2 inches, 5 centimeters between each seed, because they're going to get really big. Another great winter radish is a black Spanish one as well. In terms of leafy greens, there's a huge amount of things that you can sow outside. And I would say just do it directly. This is a variant of different chards. It's chard bright lights. So we've got all of the different colours growing on here. This grows really, really quickly. So I'd go for chard, mainly for smaller leaves before winter sets in. You can also grow things like all of the mustards and winter lettuces. And one of my absolute favourites is rocket. Rocket or arugula, it's one of the things that is really, really tasty, but it loves running to seed. And so August is one of the ways, or one of the times of the year that you can sow it, and it's not just going to run to seed straight away. There's a few leafy greens that can add some nice crunch that you can enjoy before Christmas. So one is Napa cabbage. This is one that I harvested yesterday. But you've also got your tatsoi and pak choi. These just absolutely love being sown, especially outside within the first 2 or 3 weeks of August. And it's something that I am making sure I do a lot of. Now for carrots, it really is a little bit too late for sowing. It's worth a try, and if you are to try them, I'd definitely try something smaller like a Paris market carrot. So instead of a longer growing carrot like this, they're kind of small and round and add a nice little bit of flavour to the garden. Now in terms of other root crops, we're quite limited now in terms of what is going to guarantee success, but there is enough time to sow turnips as well. So choose your favourite turnip variety, and before autumn properly sets in, they're going to be kind of nice golf ball size shaped turnips, so they're not going to be too turnipy at taste, and it is again a nice quick crop to fill in some gaps that may have appeared in your garden. You can also direct sow kale in August. For most of the stem brassicas, August is just way too late. But the nice thing about kale is that you can direct sow it, and it is really nice and hardy. And so you'll be able to pick those nice smaller leaves all throughout winter. And then they're going to come back with a vengeance the following spring and give you those delicious flowers. So on the theme of brassicas, there's 2 others that you can sow outside in August. The first is spring cabbage. That's mainly going to give you a load of leaves towards the start of springtime just to enjoy. You can treat it a little bit like Asturian tree cabbage. By April or May, you can harvest every second plant to allow the bigger plants to then develop a small head. And the final brassica is kohlrabi. So you can start off kohlrabi now, just direct sown in rows, and you get nice, small, delicious kohlrabi to enjoy over autumn. The next 2 crops are going to add a lot of flavour to kind of the tail end of the season. So the first one here, growing a load of peas that I'm going to start pulling off the pea shoots. So we're getting back into the realm of enjoying really nice, fresh, delicious pea shoots. What you can do is just sow them really thickly in a raised bed on the edge or in a container, and in about 3 weeks time you'll be having loads of pea shoots to enjoy. Another great one is spring onions. So you can either again sow these directly, or you can start them off in modules. All of the crops that I've mentioned, with exception to perhaps like the winter radish or the daikon radish, you can start off in modules in a polytunnel to just give them an extra quick boost, faster germination to then transplant outside, or you can just sow them directly outside. But spring onions, what a fantastic crop to finish the season with. Now we're going to look at undercover growing. This doesn't just apply to polytunnels, hoop houses or greenhouses. It can apply to smaller things like little hoop tunnels over a raised bed or cold frames, just depending on size. So at the moment we've got all of these tomatoes which are growing nicely. They're starting to turn colour, and we're going to start harvesting these, and then we're going to open up space underneath. And so there's a bunch of different crops that you can start off in modules now to then transplant under your tomato plants in around 2 to 3 weeks time. By the way, all of the crops that I mentioned for sowing outdoors, you can also do undercover. However, for things like maybe the rocket, which can run to seed quite easily, you can sow that undercover towards the end of August. This is an example of a hoop bed, so I'm just going to hide. So it's just very nice and simple, much cheaper than needing to buy a polytunnel. And in here, there's so many things that I can start off. So whilst it might be a little bit too late for carrots and beetroot outside, that is something that I'm going to be planting here in this little hoop bed. There are 3 nice leafy greens that you can start off in August. So those are Claytonia, lamb's lettuce, and also perpetual spinach. The nice thing about growing salads in a polytunnel over winter is even in January and February, when there isn't that much growth, you can still go in and harvest a leaf or 2 from each plant, and it means that you can maintain self-sufficiency with salads right throughout the year. It's also a nice time to start off coriander for growing undercover. Now here in my climate zone 8, coriander overwinters really nicely in a polytunnel. You could also include a couple of other herbs, for example chervil, but also dill to grow as well. There's 3 almost like main crop type things that you can sow in a polytunnel for harvesting later on in the season or at the start of next year. So the first one is fennel, the second one is cauliflower, and the third one are potatoes. So you can start off potatoes now around the start of August to be able to harvest those fresh. You can do it in pots, but to harvest those fresh for your Christmas dinner. So there's 3 crops that if you want to experiment, they're worth trying, but it's not guaranteed that they're going to be a success. One is growing peas for pea pods in a polytunnel, starting those off in August. Another one is dwarf French beans outside, like for the first week, but also for growing undercover. And then the final one, which I'm going to try this year and see what happens, is to try growing purple sprouting broccoli from sowing in the first week of August. I'm growing it all undercover to see if next spring or early summer I get any type of crop. So let's see what happens. A bit later on in the season, there's a really fun thing that you can do with some of the crops that you're growing outside, some of the mature crops. You can actually lift them up and plant them in your polytunnel. This video right here explains why you should do it, because it's a lot of fun. It'll turn your polytunnel into a jungle over winter.